Now we're going to pivot a little bit. Remember, we're looking through multiple perspectives, or we use the metaphor of lenses. And I think we're going to focus now on the technology lens. So let me just bring up a diagram, and we'll sort of set the scene here in terms of our shift to focus more on the technology. So assuming you all can see, is that working?
Yep. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So this is not to scare anybody. This is really to give a kind of a visual and get people thinking. So Nicole and I had a nice conversation last week with Dion Hinchcliffe, who created this diagram, and he creates lots of these things actually that are, you know, some of them quite mind-blowing, and others you just look at and you go like, oh, now I see how I can explain this to my executives. So hopefully this is one of those ones that you can look at and say, ah, I see what's going on here. When you're looking at the digital employee experience, it really is like a journey. It's like you picture people on a road and they're progressing through all of these things from recruiting all the way to departure. And then Diane's got this particular one is focusing on, hey, how are things changing because of all the abnormal things that have happened with the pandemic in 2020? What's going to shift now in terms of that journey? Maybe it's going to diverge a little bit or be new elements. The thing that he really called out on this, though, then I think is a really good focus for us to think about as we go forward with the rest of today and tomorrow is the employee experience platform. If you look at that little layer there, and it looks nice and neat and tidy in this diagram, you think, oh, well, that's good. We'll just layer that on and we'll be all set. And the problem is that it doesn't really exist in a sense of a way that many organizations can simply do it. It's a nice little description of what is needed, but the reality of how to enable that and bring it to life is actually really difficult. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of days.
Yeah, so one of the comments in the chat brings that out as well. So someone says, what do you do when HR itself is often challenged to provide a unified point of view? You've got silos, so HR in itself is a silo, and then you've got silos within HR, and that's, you know, something that lots of people will struggle with. And it's just, you know, by this sort of learning and by just keeping, I don't know, we've said it before, you know, bringing those light bulb moments and trying to give people real life examples that maybe eventually we'll get through, you know, bit by bit, really, and just keep it at it, really.
Yep, I'll make the obligatory 2020 apology. If you hear whining in the background, it's not me, it's my dog. He's decided to fuss with his toys. So Nicole, why don't you take us into the next session? We're going to start talking about the illuminate part of the story.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to this diagram in chat, so if people want to look at this or any of the more scarier ones that Dion Hinchcliffe has done that are much more complicated, then please feel free. Lots of them are Creative Commons, and you can just use them in your own organization as well.
Now let's turn to Workgrid's perspective on DEX from Frank Pathyil, Director of Strategy and Partnerships. Frank, are you off mute? Let's check that first.
I think I'm off mute. Can you guys hear me?
Absolutely. All right, let's roll. So what do you see as some of the critical components of a successful digital employee experience?
Well, first of all, Ted, thanks for running this event, and it's been fantastic working with the team as we get going. So from our viewpoint, you know, the first tenet of a great digital experience is that it needs to be employee first and individualized. That works for everyone, and everyone needs to be treated as an individual. So the most critical thing is that we have a wide range of generations and cultures represented in every organization. You know, COVID has brought to the forefront this notion that every employee has a different set of circumstances and conflicting priorities that make their workday unique. So your employees' realities of balancing childcare and caring for family members is now a business problem. So what matters to me is what matters, and what matters to you in your role could be different. But we probably all transact and interact across digital landscapes in about the same way. So I think the critical change in the role of the DX is the prioritization needs to now be maniacally focused on the end users. The experience needs to be personalized and contextual to allow me as an employee to work, but also facilitates being productive and moving forward as an employee.
So that sounds good for me. I'm feeling really good about that idea. How do you make that more specific, Frank?
Well, I mean, this becomes a little tricky, right? Organizations really should think broadly and holistically about the wide range of experiences that their workforce might be facing in order to create a more inclusive experience that meets the need of each employee. You know, this is the digital workplace group, and we have traditionally talked about intranets, but this is much bigger than the intranet. There are elements of engagement and elements of productivity. We've spent a lot of time talking about HR systems and transactional systems. There's even elements of the physical workspace, and in particular now, as we think about going back, we have to start thinking about how do we onboard into new spaces. So this is critical. Even though we're all remote, for the DEX to be successful, it's really about being successful across the whole spectrum: remote, in person, age gaps, and a variety of transactional systems. It's not just one thing. It needs to be a holistic and unified approach to the employee experience that crosses all of those things.
All right, I want to push you now, Frank. So that's all really inspiring, visionary. How do you actually do this in practice? Let's get people some more practical steps. What can they do?
All right. Well, look, I think the first tenet we have to understand is we have to step back a little bit from and understand. We have to become a little humble. We have to realize that people have home systems where they work in. Salespeople work in Salesforce. Marketing is in HubSpot. Developers are in Jira. We have to first start, and I think this is a big step, and realize we're talking about what happens when they take a break from their home system. This is not where they go to work all the time in the digital workplace or the digital experience. They are working in the systems that they own. When they step back and take their break, when they step out of the core systems, that's when we have to think about how do we give them a moment that matters. That, to me, is really kind of the pragmatic first kind of concession we have to make in our minds. Once we do that, then we can go from there.
Yeah, this is reminding me of what Jay was talking about in terms of what it means to be an associate. There's the work you do as an employee, and there's the stuff you have to do as an associate, right, in order to be a good employee. And how do you find that obscure system you only need once a month, or you've got to, do your timekeeping in or everything else, and it's not the one you use all the time? How can we make that better?
All right, so it's kind of a two-step process, right? Number one, let's start with a noise problem that we're having, right? Employees lose a lot of valuable time trying to sort through a lot of the tools. David said it well: which tool for which process at what point. So employees lose a lot of time trying to sort through the things that are hitting them, that don't pertain to them, in order to find or probably re-find that piece of information that they need. So a good digital experience should really be a centralized location for all the communications and notifications and resources that they need from across the business. But again, it's not an intranet solution, so it really has to be ubiquitous with where they work. HR, IT, finance, facilities. It's got to be accessible wherever and whenever you need it, instead of asking me to filter through a bunch of information. Can you curate it so I get just the things I need that's relevant to me? And then number two is simplified and unified access to core systems and enterprise transactions. That give me one place with all of my approvals and all the other simple things I need to do. Don't force me to toggle back and forth through 3 different systems to get a simple piece of work done. Don't force me to adjust to the technology. Just create an experience that adjusts to my needs. As you're seeing, Ted, this is all about me in the end. It becomes very self-centered, and that's really where we have to get to.
Well, as long as it's it's also about me as an individual and personalized, I'm good with that. So, but Frank, you and I know many of these systems you're talking about, they're not flexible and user friendly. So are we just doomed to having lousy user experiences while we talk about how it should be?
So no, we're not. Let's be clear. We aren't advocating that organizations do a rip and replace of a lot of these transactional systems that people are using. If you are using Asana versus a different task tracking tool, don't tear those out. There are a lot of tribal wars that we are never going to solve in these conversations here. These systems were selected for a reason, and those investments should be preserved. I'm sure the exact way finance set up the procurement system is second only to the sheer genius of the coding scheme behind your time tracking system. You just have to realize that me as a user, I really don't care that much, and I shouldn't have to care. Organizations can maintain those systems, but they have to create a simpler, more cohesive way for employees to just interact with them. That's what we're getting at.
So are we back to just like, hey, we have to integrate everything, we have to make all these systems talk to each other, and you know, is that the answer then? Is it really back to basics?
I'm not sure if I'm sold on that yet either, because look, trying to iframe a little window of every experience is not going to work. We have to move from thinking about integrations, and those of us who transact and have worked in IT think about a system and a system and a system. We have to stop thinking about integrations and start thinking about contextualized experiences. You know, if I need to take Friday off, it's not the Friday off system. It is, I want to take Friday off. If I need to take Friday off, just give me something self-service that lets you put in the time and then handles all the sub-steps for you and notifies the various people and takes care of the transactions in the various systems. I, again, just want to take Friday off. That's where we have to get to.
All right, so that really sounds futuristic and ideal, and it's good for me, but you know, how feasible is this? It sounds like an awful lot of work, some huge, massive project to do that.
All right, so let me offer a little bit of a plug for Brett's session tomorrow. He'll get into this a lot more, but yes, it is available now. As for being a lot of work, look, it's only a lot of work if we talk about boiling the ocean. You know, those of us who work in this area of digital experience and digital workplace and so on for years now have been talking about governance structures and how can we put something around it. The challenge is that when workflow and integration are layered in on top of content management and comms priorities and looks and feels, workflow and integration will often sort of hit the cutting room floor in the RFP. So let's go back to first principles. Let's think about what I, as an employee who is not nearly as passionate about this type of thing as you know, as the average employee is. I want to go back and just think about first principles. Just make this about putting the employee at the center. Think about what they care about. There are things we already know everyone cares about, right? You know, you got to work, so pay matters. Make it very easy for me to find my pay stub. I need to take off time, so make it very easy for me to take off time. We all onboard, and in fact, we're continuously onboarding. We all have training that we need to take. We all have a lot of the same questions. Make that stuff easy to find and easy to get, kind of in that context. Give the employee an easy way to check their paycheck, their time off, aggregate tasks together, create personalized onboarding and a chatbot to answer those crazy questions. And at that point, people will start to tune into the news too. They'll start to solicit, how do I go and open tickets? That's here today. That's what's on the employee's mind. We have to make sure that we prioritize that as we start to think about how we harness the power of these ever-evolving digital workplaces.
Frank, I love talking about this stuff. We could talk all afternoon. We're starting to run low on time. So I want to ask you, and we can continue this in the overtime session, you know, and get into this further. You know, what are the key, you know, other key points about Workgrid's perspective on DEX that you want to make sure people hear today?
Well, I'd say number one, our philosophy is really around balancing two often conflicting principles. Number one, which we've talked about, is that in order to create a successful experience for employees, organizations need to be laser focused on their needs. We've talked about that. And then number two is one we've kind of danced around a little bit. And it's realizing that those major core systems were chosen and selected for a reason. They were chosen often for how they crunch numbers and the needs of the power users. Those who are not native to the system are often lost.
All right. I think we have time maybe for one specific example if you've got one, and then we'll turn to questions. So if people have questions, make sure you're putting them in the chat for Frank or Maximo, and we'll get to those in just a moment.
Okay, let me take one more. All right, so here. Ted, can you still hear me?
I can still hear you, yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's give you an example. So, right now, a lot of these systems, how software has been selected and implemented, it's done from a top-down approach with senior teams choosing the best solutions for individual purposes, core systems, HR, et cetera. While this approach leads to a best-of-class solution, it also leads to a terrible experience for the majority of the workforce. So the answer for this is really to aim at a technology viewpoint that adds a layer on top of it. Just give me a way to get what I need from the HR system, the planning system, those other systems pulled into my user experience so I can start to understand it better. Don't ask me to bend to those systems. Pull that up to me so that I can start to understand them. Does this make sense, Ted? I mean, this is where I know we're running a little tight on time, but this is kind of the key message that our viewpoint is, which is that we have to extrapolate from those experience layer. We have to put an experience layer atop all of these transactional systems and then deliver that value to those employees so they can start to hit those tasks that they want to that matter to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's making a lot of sense, Frank. And it's if we go back to that, the Dion slide showing the experience layer, even though it's that simple little box on that chart, there's a lot to it. And you're beginning to tease out those details, that there really are so many systems that have to be accounted for. But if you get that employee experience layer right, then the experience literally for the employee is much better. It's much smoother. It's much more efficient. They can focus on their job, not on all the other things, as Jay said about being an associate. They can focus on how to be do their job really well. So let's wrap on that point and see if we have any questions. Nicole, if we have questions coming in the chat.
Yeah, so we've got lots of statements coming in, and people are having it's like a party going on in chat, actually. Everyone's just agreeing with everybody. Hopefully there's going to be lots of connections made, so that's quite good. But I think that people are saying, what a lot of it boils down to is that employees don't really much care, and I think that in some of these slides that was coming out as well, that really we've just got to look at what the employee wants to do rather than where they go, and they're not really looking at they're not really worried about experience layers or any of these things. We've got to do that thinking for them and surface things that they need to do. And there were some interesting things about deskless workers as well. So like whether it's manufacturing people, I mean, quite often when we have these discussions, we're talking about office-based workers, but really we need to start thinking wider than that. And I think that is happening, where we're looking at workers that use mobile technology. And I know that DWG has done some research on that and how to focus that employee experience or the benefits really of a better employee experience to them. So they just want to find and get things done in the short break they have from any sort of production lines or wherever they're working without having to worry about learning navigations to many systems, which they may not access that often. So that's quite interesting, and it'd be quite interesting to put that out to our panel really and our experts on this call today to see what they think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I am very passionate about the deskless worker. I mean, my first job out of school was running a piece of production line, and I'm a strong proponent of the Toyota method and the wisdom of often employees that aren't on desks. What is interesting is the mobile experience is now kind of universal. It is our consumer interface. If you are younger, you think about your tablet and your phone more than you think about your desktop. What comes to mind for us is high value use cases. Like I loved Jay's pool car story. That app is a great little piece of functionality that companies are building. Everybody is building these little pieces of functionality. The question is, how do I go and take that app, which is high value, and give it to somebody? And if you think about a person in Jay's case, they're probably doing it from their phone. I know that's how I operate. So Workgrid, what we thought about when we built the platform is that we built both a user experience that gives out-of-the-box functionality, pay, time off, et cetera, but by necessity, because we deployed it to Liberty Mutual and 50,000 employees when we started, we had to make it extensible. And we took that same concept of extensibility to the platform when we productized it. So we've built it in such a way that if you've got a great app, like pool car, which honestly I really kind of love, can I take the pool car app set and the APIs and consume them within the app, and then just produce a card that says, hey, here are the relevant components of the app that I can pull into the pool car experience, that I can pull into an app so somebody can understand it. This is one of those great challenges that you see with chatbots and things like that. Oftentimes they're built, you're building these great applications, but they're lost someplace in the intranet, and they don't have a unified necessary home on a SharePoint landing page, which people are going to less, and not necessarily in the Teams landing page, which is kind of hard to wrestle with, and desktop and Slack and so on. Well, we kind of take the approach of, let's step back from that. Let's figure out a way to just put it in a mobile interface, build out the relevant components of it, and then make sure that I can bring it in. If I put that alongside news, well, this is just like good real estate at that point. If I can go and get my pool car experience from there, I'm also likely to see news. I'm also likely to see social. I'm also likely to start interacting with people. And then we start to hit those 6 priorities that David was talking about early on at the beginning on how we build a better digital experience. It's driving a little bit of that utility to people and bringing some of those internal investments, you know, directly to the phone app without having to go build it as a phone app right from the get-go. This is kind of our viewpoint on it.
That's great. Thanks, Frank.